Welcome to Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle. I'm Bobby Owsinski, and this is a show all about music, music production, and the music business. My guest today is electronic music superstar Stonebridge, who's remixed, written, and produced quite a number of hits over the years. But the first thing I want to talk to you about is Yahoo Screen. Yahoo Screen is aimed at being a competition to YouTube. It's one of the ways Yahoo is trying to stay relevant by doing their own video service. One of the highlights of this system is something called 365 Days of Concerts. This is on the Live Nation tab of Yahoo Screen. And as the name says, every single night there's a concert. Now, they've had Dave Matthews, for instance, and they're going to have big artists like Justin Timberlake, Kiss, and Usher coming up. But for the most part, they have smaller acts, Chevelle, Jurassic 5, acts like that. That being said, it's a good way to see live music, and it's a good way to see it, obviously, without even being there. So it's very, very cool. There are a couple of issues with it. Now, for instance, the timing isn't perfect. It's on every night at 8 p.m. That's 8 p.m. Eastern. So if you're on the West Coast like I am, it happens right at 5 p.m., which for most people, that means it's right when they're in the middle of rush hour here. It's not a good thing. It means they probably have zero chance of seeing this, which is too bad. One of the other problems is the fact that there's no scrubbing. So, in other words, you can't say, oh, I want to go back and hear that other song again. Also, if you come in 10 minutes late, you've missed that first 10 minutes. You can't rewind to the beginning. Now, what they do have is they do show a number of highlights that you can see after the fact, and that's cool. But once again, if you want to see the entire show, you pretty much have to be there at 8 p.m. or be in front of your computer or your iPhone or your iPad, your tablet at 8 p.m. One of the other things that kind of bugs me about this is there's constant camera cutting. So in other words, they have, a dozen cameras and are constantly shifting from one to another to another to another and giving you lots of audience shots. Personally, I hate audience shots. I could care less about the audience. I want to see the performer. That's why I'm tuning in. That's why I'm going to a concert, for instance. And when you show the audience, it's like, been there, done that. Seen it enough. So that just detracts from the program for me. One of the things that I'm hoping for in the future is that a program like this, a service like this, will give you your own multiple feeds that you could cut between yourself, or else you can just select one that you really like and stay there the entire concert. So for instance, you might get the best one in the house, which might be third row center, and just decide to stay on that one for the entire concert. That would be fine by me personally. I'd much rather do that and have the option to choose what I'm going to see on stage than leave it up to someone who's going to cut it badly, especially if you have a director that doesn't have a feel for music. I don't know why a director would try to do music if they don't have a feel for it, but it happens sometimes, and their cuts really don't make a lot of sense. They don't feel like they're on the beat, and it just doesn't work. So that's Yahoo Screen. It's worth checking out. You just go to the Yahoo page and look for Screen. Or I think it's screen.yahoo.com, and go to the Live Nation tab, and you're going to find the 365 days of concerts there. Next thing I want to talk about is managing your studio time. If you're a musician who's just starting to produce, or if you're a new producer and this is your first project or second project, or you're pretty new into the field, one of the problems that normally pops up is the fact that it's very difficult to gauge the amount of time you're going to need. This probably isn't a problem if you're doing your own project, for instance, in your own studio. There's no budget and there's no time limit. That's actually kind of bad, because what ends up happening is you end up spending way too much time and just making things different instead of better. And I've seen project after project where it never completes. Might go on for years and never complete, because there is no time limit. There is no completion date. There is no deadline. If you're working with an artist that's signed to even a small label, generally speaking, there's some money involved, because there's at least a small budget, and then there's at least a deadline, because they're going to say, we want it by June 15th, for instance. And then it's up to you, the producer, to help the artist, the band, deliver in time. How do you do that? Well, I've found that there's three things that you have to think about. The first thing is you have to understand what the situation is. So you have to hear the band live. You have to hear how good the players are. You have to understand what their capabilities are. You have to hear the demos. So that means you have to hear what the songs are like so you can evaluate them. Do the arrangements need some help? Then it's usually a good idea to go back and listen to the previous recordings because that will tell you how comfortable the band is in the studio. Also, it will tell you what they like to sound like or what they don't like to sound like because they'll tell you right away, we didn't like the way that came out, we didn't like the way it sounded, or we want it to sound more like this. So that's always important to go back and to listen to any previous recordings. If it's electronic music, it's a little different because what's happening is you're building up a song in the box, so there's less need for pre-production. Pre-production might mean just a day of getting together and talking with the artist to kind of figure out what the direction is going to be. It might be just exchanging songs. Nonetheless, there is a period, somewhat of a period of pre-production. So you always have to understand that that's going to be there and figure out how much time you're going to build in for that. The next thing is you have to approximate how long each project segment is going to take. There's generally 5 project sections. There's pre-production, like we just talked about. There's basic tracking, there's overdubs, there's mixing, and there's mastering. And like I said, if you have live musicians, that pre-production will probably take longer than if you have electronic music that's being done in the box. That being said, I've found that the better the musicians, the less time they want to spend in pre-production and the less time they need to spend in pre-production. Really great musicians who are studio savvy will generally figure things out in the studio. So in other words, if the arrangements aren't quite there, you can pretty much guarantee they're going to happen on the fly. And this again is with really good, savvy studio musicians. That being said, there are fewer and fewer of those around. So a lot of times, if you don't know the band, you don't know their capabilities, you can't rely on that. You pretty much have to do as much as you can as far as honing the songs and honing the arrangements. You have to do that all in pre-production. The next part is basic tracking. Once again, basic tracking in electronic music doesn't really happen because you're creating the track on the fly. You're doing everything you can pretty much on the fly. In the process, even though it's the same, there's still this difference of how long you're taking in this particular section. So for instance, if you have a band that you're going to track and you're tracking an album, 10 songs worth, you have to determine how long it's going to take for those songs to be tracked. How long do you think they're going to need? Because you have to get this right. If a basic track isn't as good as it can be, then no matter what you do to it later, it's not going to get any better. So this is the next part that you have to figure out. How long is a basic track going to take you? And then, of course, we have overdubs. And overdubs is usually where a song comes to life, where that extra sheen comes in, where that little extra magic comes from that it didn't have before. So you have to make sure there's enough time there. And finally, you have mixing. Mixing usually takes at least a day a mix. So in other words, a day a song. In the old days, we kind of figured out it would be a day and a half a song. And the reason for that is we'd have, in the console days anyway, there'd be a song up, we'd work on it all day, we'd go home at night, come back in the morning, and at that point make any final changes with fresh ears, and then start on the next mix. And this worked really well for years and years. Since most of us are working in the box these days, that doesn't really apply, because you might be working on a mix for 3 or 4 hours, then get tired of it and work on another one for a couple hours, and then work on another one in sort of a round-robin sort of fashion. That being said, it still ends up being about a day a mix, so this is something that you have to build in. And of course, we have mastering, and mastering is no more than a day. Usually, if you go to a pro mastering facility with a real pro top-end engineer, it's a 4-hour session for an entire album. So you can build this in accordingly. The last thing is to develop your milestones. And the milestones would be on June 1st, we have to finish basic tracks. On July 1st, all the overdubs have to be finished. On August 1st is when we begin to mix. Things like that. The best thing to do is if you have a due date is to work backwards. So figure it out from there. So if it's August 1st is your due date, August 1st is your delivery date to the record label, for instance, what you'd do is you'd think, okay, I'm going to mix on the 27th of July, and this will give me a day or two just in case I have to go back and do something, do some fixes or some changes. And then you figure, okay, I want to have my mixes finished by the 25th, for instance. And you keep on going backwards, figuring out when each of your overdubs you're going to finish. I want to have all my vocals finished by July 1st, for instance. I want all the guitars done by July 5th. And you keep working like that. You'll find that you may have to adjust this on the fly, and usually you will. But a good producer will always build in extra time, just in case. So there'll always be an extra day here, an extra day there. And a good producer also knows where he can steal time from. So he knows, or she knows, that, oh, okay, I need an extra day for tracking, but I can pull it out over here in mixing, or I can pull it out during overdubs, and vice versa. So this is the value of managing your studio time, of bringing things in on time and on budget. And that's one of the ways that you do it. If you have any questions or comments, please send them to questions@BobbyOInnerCircle.com. I love reading your questions and comments, so please send them. My guest today is producer-songwriter Stonebridge, who among other things was a Grammy nominee for his remix of Closer by Neo, and he also won a BMI Songwriter of the Year award for Jason Derulo's I Don't Want to Go Home. That's very prestigious. It's a very cool thing. Stone has also done remixes for the likes of Britney Spears and Cher, Enrique Iglesias, and Usher, among many, many others. He also has an acclaimed show called Epic Mix on Sirius XM every Saturday night. I talked to Stone from his studio in Sweden via Skype. Welcome to my Inner Circle, Stone. Appreciate you being here today.
Thank you, Bobby. It's a pleasure. I love doing these.
Now, I read somewhere, or actually I might have seen a video about how you got started as a DJ, where you DJ'd for a graduation party. Is that right?
That's correct. My sister's graduation party, and my dad saw the budget, and it was a staggering $50 for DJ. And he said, no, that's not going to happen. Stone, you play. But I've never DJ'd. Doesn't matter. You have the records. And I did. I was sort of a disco boy at the time. You know, I was out in clubs and buying 12 inches for some reason. And so I called a friend who had the mixer and two SL1200s. So we went there, and basically I caught the bug on that one gig and never looked back, really.
Were you a musician before that? Did you have any exposure to creating music at all?
Absolutely. I was a really crappy guitar player. I never got to play the solo. I was the chords man, you know. I was the rhythm guitar guy. And we had a band. We didn't have a singer, so we didn't get anywhere. We couldn't get gigs, you know. It's kind of boring to watch, you know, a couple of guys noodle on guitars, you know. That old trick. So we never really got anywhere. But I started, my family, we had a piano. We had all sorts of music playing. So it was kind of in a family thing to play instruments, you know. And I started with the flute, as all Swedes do. And then it was too boring. I switched to guitar, and I asked them, guys, can we play any funky tunes, you know, something fun, you know? They wanted to play these sort of semi-classical scales and shit like that. So
yeah, right.
I left that. So I'm self-taught, you know. I was playing 2 records, as we all do, you know.
Yeah, sure. Well, that explains why you're so musical. And what I really like about what you do is the fact that there is that overriding musicality in everything. It's not just a beat that's pounding at you. I mean, there's a lot of that for sure, but there's a lot that's musically going on. And I was going to say, either you learned on the job really fast, or you had to have some sort of background in music, and now you just told me what that is. So
yes. Well, you know, you get an instinctual feeling, you know. First of all, the song's got to carry. If you have a vocal, the vocal will have to carry the song. Sometimes you have a flat melody, you know, it's not really a melody. We call them flatliners. Then you have to come up with a riff or, you know, a chord progression that will make that flatliner sound very interesting. So, but, you know, you can feel if the song is not going anywhere, you know, I feel that in my whole body, you know, I can't have it like that. You know, I need to change it so it moves musically.
Well, that's a good question then. When you collaborate with someone, is a collaboration right from the beginning of the song, or are you creating a beat? Or are you creating a track first and then bringing in the vocalist or whomever else? How does that work with you?
We have basically it's 3 different types of collaborations. The one I did with Crystal was in the studio in Stockholm. I had to rent a weighted key, for this Muso guy, Rasmus Faber. He demanded, he couldn't play my little shitty plastic M-Audio mother keyboard. He needed like weighted keys and stuff.
Yeah.
So I had to go to the music store. It was a big drag. But, I finally got it in. And Crystal was blown away. She said, and I quote, "I haven't seen instruments in a studio for 15 years." Something like that, she said. She was like clapping her hands because her dad was a jazz musician. So she was really excited. And the guy was just incredible. He played the most incredible chord progressions. And she started humming along. And I was thinking about the drums. And then he played it into Logic. And they were chit-chatting in the sofa. And I made a quick beat. And then I told him, we need a bridge or something here. So he added that dramatic string thing. Whilst talking to us, he was playing the string arrangement. It was ridiculous. We have never seen anything like it. So that's the one. That's really, I'm tempted to say that's the best way, but not always. Because it takes a lot, to come up with that knockout melody and the lyrics and everything in one session like that. Most of the time, you send a track. And then we come into method 3, which is basically you take a remix you did recently and you swipe the vocals. You send that to a writer and they come up with the top line. And then you sort of remix the top line. You take away everything from the remix and start over. Because when you remix a lot, that's how you approach music. You get the a cappella and you build a song around it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are the 3 methods for me, at least.
How did you get into remixing?
Well, it was, let's see now. Yes, we started, we were 10 DJs, Stockholm DJs. We met in the record store, and it was this 2 American companies, Disconet and Hot Tracks. They did a subscription-based double vinyl service every month with remixes of big tracks. Then there was the English one, which was DMC. And the problem with the English one was that they did medleys. No DJ in the world would put on a 25-minute medley of pop songs. What the hell am I going to do? Pick my nose? It's like, it didn't feel real. The American ones had remixes of individual tracks, but it was a lot of freestyle at the time. It wasn't all house music. It was kind of random. So we decided we need to start a DJ service. So we did, completely bootleg, and we got busted the first release. Our rights organization called us, "Guys, what are you doing? This is a bootleg. You need clearance for these."
Yeah, right.
And miraculously, we managed to get one pretty big independent label that had licenses for Sugar Hill Records and stuff like that. So we had some cool material to work with. And then gradually we got major by major in the end. Like this was around 86. We had permission from most majors, so we could do like Prince, Madonna, and whatever was big at the time. And as we were doing that, we actually did our own remixes. It was quite simple. 4-track Tascam. You put the track on track 1, 2, and then you did overdubs, silly samples, and you re-edited the record and added maybe a drum intro, something like that. Mm-hmm. But, as money came in, we bought more, we bought a 24-track Studer, and we bought a big console, and things got serious, and people out the studio, so they came down. "Hey guys, let's make a track." Mainly rappers came down, so you did a beat and you got a rapper on, and then labels started to take notice. These guys are good, and one of them was Champion Records in the UK. They contacted us and wanted to license a song called "And Consuelo See the Day." Mm-hmm. Released it. It did pretty well on club level, and I was a young guy. I wanted to do international remixes, so I asked them, do you have any old shit in the basement that I can remix? And they said, we have this song, Robin Stone, Show Me Love. Robin Stone, I think. I was thinking that was meant to be, man. I'm Stonebridge, she's Robin Stone. It just has to happen. So I still have the 2-inch, by the way. They sent me that massive tape, by FedEx or something. And I did a mix, and in typical English fashion, it was like, "It's all right, but..." And there was a whole list of button shit in there. So I got really angry, and I had a gig on a Saturday night. I went in like 4 in the afternoon, and I knocked that out in 4.5 hours. You know when you're angry and you say, "Okay, I'm gonna show you, bastards." So I
Yeah.
went in and I probably just felt, what was right. I had the bass line, but it was pick bass, which is preset number 16 on a Korg M1. So I switched to number 17, which is the organ. Oh, that's funky. Then I added 2 chords in the chorus, and I distorted a Yamaha TX81Z, for that distortion thing in the beginning.
Yeah.
And that was it, really. I swear, it took 4.5 hours.
Wow.
I
Well,
probably didn't overthink the record. And then I turned it in, and they said it was all right. And then I didn't hear anything. 9 months later, it was a top 5 record in the UK. And a year later, top 5 in the US. It was just mad.
yeah.
So I asked them, why didn't you tell me, guys? Because your remix fee would get higher. So they kept me in the dark. I had no idea. I got hit up by Roger Sanchez and all these big dogs from New York. They were so impressed, and I had no idea why. But the record was a hit, apparently.
Very cool. Well, how long does it take you to do a remix generally?
A remix, usually these days, it depends on the state of the parts. I mean, we used to call them parts. Now it's all stems. And most people are actually quite clued up. So you get really nice stems. The problem is that they're usually quite processed. They let it run through the mastering chain.
Yeah.
But the good news is that you can line up the record. Like all the stems, you get like 10, 12 stems. And that's the record. So I basically mute everything but the vocals. And I start on drums. And then I play a few things, and then I unmute tracks from the original. Because my theory is that if you were singing on that track, there's got to be something, the vibe of the record will be in these parts.
Yeah.
So I like to use, bits and pieces. Sometimes I look something from the original, sometimes I reverse something, or I just use one chord. But I like to include pieces from the original, to give it a little identity. And it can take, the fastest is probably 2 days, I would say. And trouble mixes, when it's a lot of major key and you want it to sound cool, but it's way too cheerful, that can take up to a week.
So it's easier to do mixes in a minor key then?
Well, it's actually, with EDM, I've noticed that it's a lot of major key now.
Yeah.
Because it's quite sequence-based. It's just a bass line, basically 1 note per bar. So you can't really tell if it's major or minor. But then the big takeoff, the big melodic part is usually ending, or in the middle there is a random major key chord, but because it lifts the song. We all know that the really strong songs have a mix of minor and major. You can get that really surprising effect, which is like, oh, that's big.
So if you're just using the stems, and let's say you get a song in a major key, but you decide not to use anything except the vocal, would you change it to a minor key or minor major? Would you do that?
Well, we do have the corresponding, like C minor is D sharp, major. So you can always do that trick, you try the corresponding major or versus minor chord.
Yeah, yeah.
And sometimes you can get really interesting tension, with a major part. As long as it's not play down chords, like a grand piano, then it's kind of hard to disguise. But a major guitar part can create a wonderful tension in a minor environment.
How often?
Or you make it a little jazzy, everything goes in jazz, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it does, depending on how far out there you get.
Yeah.
How often do you use real players?
Well, it happens that I play a little guitar myself on them, or bass, just for flavor. It's not. It would be if I need a sax or any kind of horn, or live strings, or I bring in that guy I mentioned before, Rasmus Faber, because he's silly, and he's got such a good library of. There's so many good libraries now, aren't there?
Yeah, no kidding.
I have recorded live strings 3 or 4 times. You have to score the piece, and I don't really write scores, so you have to. You can print that thing in Logic, but it's kind of rudimentary. So you have to get a guy in to write that down, because none of those guys would play a note without,
Yeah.
a score.
Yep, that's the way that works. That's for sure.
Yeah, we brought in horn players one time, and we pressed play on the tape, and it was rolling, and they were just standing there. Come on, guys, talk back, guys, play. What? What are we gonna play? But just do something. No.
Yeah,
they refused. So we had an Atari at the time with notator. So we pressed the N on notator, and the screen was full of notes, and all the guys were looking at that. Yeah. Okay, I see where you're going now.
Yeah.
They were humming along, seeing those notes, and we were blown away. Man, these guys are actually reading music, from fucking little dots and shit.
Well, that's one.
It's really quite sad that musicians. I mean, some musicians can't. They're really handicapped without a score, which I find really weird.
One of the great things about LA studio musicians, especially the A-team, is you could actually say, okay, what do you hear in this? And will you add something? And they'll come up with it. So, and this is especially horn players. And yes. They'll do head charts, right on the spot, which is wonderful. And usually they're better than what you can come up with if you're not a horn player yourself, or you're not an arranger and you're just a guitar player or a keyboard player. You can't think like a horn player or a string player. So a lot of times it's better if they do it. And that's one of the great things about being here, I got to say, that is an advantage over other places.
Oh yeah, America is a whole different. I mean, there was in the disco days, you had that A-team playing on all disco records. There was a guy with a suitcase with percussion instruments. There was the bass guy and the guitar guy. And someone told me that those guys were busy like 2 sessions a day for years.
Yeah.
They must have been so tight, unbelievable. And you have that in LA still. I know that.
Yeah. How did you learn to mix?
It was a long, painful journey. I mean, I remember we had the board, and we were 5 guys sharing the studio. So you had to finish, or you had to take Polaroids or write up. We had these sheets, but it never matched up, did it? When you try to recreate. It can be something, the temperature of the desk. It can be a lot of things. So then I started as audio became more and more available. It was the Session 8, and then it was the Pro Tools 16. And one day I noticed I'm using 2 channels on the desk and the volume, Everything was in the box. And I would say that's when the mixing really started. I mean, in the beginning, everything was saturated and too much, because digital is not the same, is it?
No.
I mean, there's no headroom. I mean, 0, you can't pass. It just cracks up, and it's not a very good crack either.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well,
I think the trick was to take it easy, headroom, and once you have that done, and also realizing that kick drums have a key. A lot of guys miss on this, They have a massive kick drum in B, and the track is something completely not compatible, like D.
Yeah.
And it will be the bottom end gets really messy. It's like a fight going on down there. So that was a huge thing. Like it was about 3-4 years. As house became more and more heavy, you have to have the bass line, and the kick has to be incorporated. It's part of the same group, so to speak. So I think that was the biggest revelation. And once you got that, I mean, I always felt that if the bass and kick is right, half the battle is won.
Yeah, sure.
And a good hook, a good song on there, of course. But, if the bass and kick doesn't work, you can work for years. You will never get that working.
Well, speaking of kick drums and tuning kick drums, what would you do in order to put it in tune with the track? Would you try another sample? Would you use an oscillator, key an oscillator with it? How do you do that usually? Retune?
There's a few ways. The easy way now is Nicky Romero's kick plugin, which has everything in the window. You select the click, the top end of it, the transient, if you will, and then you select the body, and it's right there. You just tune it. You drag that, and how long the decay is. But I find it's a bit like the Juno 106. It's a beast. You can get so much bass, just everything drowns. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to go too excited on that one. But normally it's 2 kicks. You have one for the flavor, the wood, the kind of knock and click, and then you have one with the meat. And that's the one that needs to be, the one with the long decay needs to be in key. So I have sorted, I put the key on the kick, and I have a folder. And then I use that mixed in key wheel I have written out. It's always in the studio with me. So I see if the track is a G, C, F kick will work, or D. So you see what works. And then the best thing is a kick that is just pure the same key.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you avoid playing on that note, or you sidechain the bass on that note. So the whole bottom end becomes one harmonious, nice, force.
Do you think that's one of the big tricks of what you do? Do you think that when it comes to mixing, that's a signature?
Well, it is. I do bass lines still. I don't do one note bass lines that often.
Yeah.
It's because a lot of tracks now, it's more about the rhythm. The whole kit is sort of the bass line. You can't hear the bass line, but there's a lot of bass. I always try to put a bass line. I think it's a very important sort of sub hook, like the Robin S, the bass line was pretty much the hook. So it's always been my trademark to have some sort of bass line, and also the way I put my chords down with the bass. I think it's very hard to pinpoint what is the actual sound, but it's definitely in the mix as well as in the playing.
How do you approach effects like, especially reverb and delay? I've noticed that you use reverb an awful lot as compared to a lot of other of your contemporaries right now who tend to use more delay, I think. But yeah. You have very nice washes. It's very just laid in very nice and deep, but yet it doesn't feel washed out.
No, it's the Lexicon, man. It's the Lexicon plate. I use Universal Audio, that their Lexicon plugin. It's just the best. It's one for vocal thickening plate, and it's just the best because it's not very heavy. It's not. You can filter out the bass because it tends to get muddy if you do too much. But I add a hair of things, to get that lovely umbrella, that room feeling. You sort of place it in the spectrum. Mm-hmm. And then I use the Logic tape delay. I think that's the best delay there is. So I came from Roland Dep 5, which was built-in chorus. It was really dirty, but that was the charm with it.
Yeah, right. So
the Logic tape delay has that quality. It's kind of gritty, It's a little bit shitty, So it gives it that flavor.
Yeah, that actually works better too. If you have a delay that's too clean, it doesn't work, does it? Most of the time.
No, it doesn't. No, you need a little something in there, a little dirt. But so basically, it's the Lexicon is my main reverb that I use for vocals and some of the keyboards. Then I have the the tape delay. Those two are always in every mix. And then sometimes I create a room. If there's a lot of percussion in the record, it's always good to put claves and blocks and stuff like that with a room type thing, like a really, like a drum room, if you will.
Yeah, right.
But it doesn't sound very natural. So it's only if I want to highlight like a percussive bit, and create its own space. I use a short, like a room type thing.
When you're saying
then sometimes a flanger. It's really cool, actually. You add a little flanger on random things because it kind of binds it together. I notice.
Yeah, it's a nice glue, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes. When you say the Lexicon, you're talking about the 224 plugin, the UAD plugin. Yes, yeah, I got it. Okay.
The one looking like that control module that you saw on desks in the 80s.
I can remember when we used to use that all the time, and it was one of those things where you're coming from a plate where you don't have to think about anything, and then all of a sudden you have this box where you can control so much, and it took a really long time. And I always thought, well, I'm stupid, I can't make this work, until I've talked to a lot of other people, and they said, oh yeah, we have the same problem. I just find one preset that I like and I always use it, which then I copied some presets for some other people that worked great, and it always sounded good. And then when they changed to the blue one, it was never the same. That white 224 was just dynamite.
Yes, sometimes it's a lot of manufacturers and that do that. I find that with iOS 7, actually, why change something that worked so beautifully? But, sometimes they have to update for update's sake. Logic 10 is another one.
Yeah.
Why? Things that have been in the same place for 15 years in Logic are now moved, you have to look for it.
Yeah.
That's not the idea, is it?
So you're a Logic guy then. You've been on Logic for a long time, I assume.
Yes. I used the Dream days was Logic with Logic front end with TDM hardware.
Mm-hmm.
That was unbelievable. No latency, and we're talking about 10 years of no latency. You know, you could record with all the effects you wanted. Singer had a beautiful mix, you know, whatever you heard, she heard. And you could record MIDI straight in. Everything was beautiful. And then one day, DigiDesign felt that Logic are sort of taken away from Pro Tools, the software. So they killed that support. Just one day, it was over.
Right.
Yeah, so now it's universal and beautiful. It works as well. The only thing that's not working as well is routing things in, I find.
Oh, you're using an Apollo then?
Yes, Apollo. Routing like a tube EQ, like a loop in and out. There's a lot of problems there, you know. There's a little latency things, and it takes a while to get it going. And it doesn't have to sound great immediately. That with TDM, you just plugged it in XLR, boom, boom, and it was done.
What else are you using in your studio? What are you using for monitors and monitor system? And
I have first the closest is the NS10s, which I use for basic levels, vocal levels and keyboard levels. You can't beat that with the NS10s. I don't know why. It's just magic. Also, it's really the iPhone. The devices test. You know, if you don't hear the bass line in the NS10s, you will never hear it.
Yeah.
Then my main monitors are the Mackie's HR824s.
Mm-hmm.
The old ones, not the Chinese ones. The ones that are built in America. I bought them from LA, actually, on eBay. And they're the best because they go down all the way to 37. They have this interesting element, in the back. Some theory with extra bass. I don't know how they did it, but it works. Because I don't believe in subs, and satellites. I don't feel that it's a united sound. It always feels like the bass is coming from somewhere else.
Yeah, like there's something missing in the middle.
Yes, exactly. That's it. It's that meaty low mid. Some producers in Poland told me that's where you see if it's a professional producer. It's the lower mid.
Yeah.
It's not the bass, it's not the top, it's the energy in the lower mid and how that's mixed. That's the difference between pros and amateurs.
Well, that's what we say with mixers here. As a matter of fact, it's how you get your low end because anybody can balance things up, but it's getting the meat and the power in the mix, and that's the tough part sometimes. And what I find is most people can't hear it. They have the wrong monitors, or they're listening at too low a level, and they just can't hear whether it's there or not. I think that's a big problem of most beginning mixers.
That's very true. There's also the loud listener, the guy that blows his ears in 20 minutes, and there's no treble, so it's like, ooh, screech when you...
Yeah.
Everything is tired, the vocal is mixed way too long in, it's like... We all gone through that phase, when you listen loud for 4 hours. It's not working. Now it's a combination. I use these VW... I used to use Beats, actually, because of the bass. But now I have these VSC. It's a clothing brand. And Reza, they hooked up this guy Reza, the hip-hop guy. And they're the low end is it's like a magnifying glass on the low end. So you can hear the full separation down there. And I listen really low volume. And then I have a club system. It's not a brand. It's a guy that built it for me. It's 2 double 15 inches. Something that pumps air.
Yeah.
And what I usually do is the other room trick. You play the song really loud and you walk away to the next room.
Yeah.
Because you hear the reflection. You will hear what it would be like standing sort of in the DJ booth in a club.
Yeah.
You can tell if it's doing the right things, if it moves the air the right way.
What are you using for a monitor controller?
I have a Crane song, Avocet.
Oh, yeah, they're great.
I came from Central Station, and I had a mix-up, and I switched to this one, and I swear, it's a bit like servicing your car. You never feel a difference, do you? But in this case, I actually heard something.
Yeah.
It's like ridiculous Class A, it's like hand-built, and it's really complicated, to get... Everything is multifunction, so to get the singer to hear what you're hearing is a day job,
Yeah, right.
But just to play music through it is just beautiful. I absolutely love it.
Do you
then a very important thing that I use, which is not really speakers, but it's the Spectra-Fu, the spectrum analyzer.
Yeah.
It's the best thing, and any producer, buy that. It's expensive, but it's worth every single penny. Because once you looked at that for about a month, you can see what it sounds like. Immediately, you play someone's mix, you see a hole in the 220 area, it's a dip there, or you can see what's wrong with the mix immediately. And if you hover with the mouse, you see the actual frequency. So if you have a spike, in a vocal, it can be like shrill, like that one area where it's really shrill, and you just hover the mouse where you see the spike, and then you do a little dipping there on a good filter. I find it, I can't live without it, really.
There's so many ways you can set that up. How do you set it up?
It's it's very complicated. You go in there and it feels like 1992, the first digital interface kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you have to know stream. They call it streams. Apparently in the computer there are streams with audio going, it's the internal, it's the universal audio, and whatever other drivers you have. And then with a little luck you get it playing, and then you leave it, don't touch it. I found the streams from the Apollo and I left it there.
Yeah.
On the laptop, it's not working. I don't know why. I upgraded to Mavericks, and it just died.
Well, doesn't the plugin? Is that? Is there a new version of that works on Mavericks?
Probably yes. I mean, those guys are not the quickest guys. It's not like regular updates. It's more like once every other year.
Yeah.
Yeah. This one is from modified, created 2012. It should be a new one, actually. I should probably go there. I shouldn't blame them, I should check it out. Besides.
Yeah. Last question. It's been great having you. This has been terrific. I've learned a lot, as always. But there's one question I have for you. I like to ask everyone that comes on. What's the best piece of business advice that you've either learned or someone imparted to you along the way?
Very good question. First of all, I never give away masters. A lot of young guys especially don't know what a master is. They don't understand publishing. And that is your pension plan, your body of, your work. Like Prince, he signed very, very early a shit contract with Warner's. And that's why he did that silly face when he had no name and all that, because he was stuck in that. He didn't have access to his masters. Same thing with George Michael. He won over Sony. They signed these early deals that they're stuck in. So be very careful with your masters and your publishing. Make sure you have that in order. And if you don't understand it or know it, ask a music lawyer or a friend that knows. Because it's very important to get at least a basic idea of how a contract should look and what to look for and what to not sign. Especially in this digital age, because there's so many rights, like neighboring rights. I mean, 95% of people, artists don't know what neighboring rights is. It's where you get paid as a musician, or a producer to perform on a record. And it's actually a lot of money there. And if you're sloppy, you can actually let labels collect yours. Even though they're not allowed to, they will. So it's a good idea to get these business points cleaned up early on. And license records, don't give them away. You can license it for 5 years. In the dance industry, I mean, after 5 years for a track, it's no one's interested.
Yeah.
But you can then, like at the end of your career, you might have a catalog of 200 songs or 200 tracks, and you control the publishing. Or it could be like a movie or a score or advert or something like that. That's a lot of money in there.
That's great. Words of wisdom. I love it.
Yes. I mean, it's not very sexy, it's not funky and a trick how to do a kick drum, but it's a very good advice. Be careful with your music and don't sign away everything.
This has been great. Thank you so much, Stone.
Thank you. We can do part 2 next year.
Let's do it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
If you want to find out more about Stonebridge and listen to his music, go to stonyboymusic.com. That's Stoneyboy, STONEYBOYMUSIC.com, all one word. You can also catch his Epic Mix program on SiriusXM every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, send them to questions@BobbyOInnerCircle. I love reading them, so please send them. Many thanks to Steve Cherubino, who's the host of the producer podcast at theproducer.club. That's ThePorDucer.club. He's the guy that puts this together after the scene. Thank you, Steve. To listen to other episodes of Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle, go to BobbyOwsinski.com and select the podcast tab, or you can go to BobbyOinnerCircle.com or find it on iTunes or Stitcher. At BobbyOwsinski.com, you can find a sign-up form for my newsletter and for alerts for new podcasts. This is Bobby Owsinski. I will see you next time.